Why are you arguing?
She has
that was a fast.
Yeah, and I just blocked her. I'm like,
just too partisan. It's just too partisan. It's like
she's not an expert in this. She knows nothing about it.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
Just, right. She just has this need to be in the middle of everything. And whatever.
Yeah. Also, you never can underestimate the potential for a white progressive to tell someone who isn't a white progressive how to live and be. That's their thing.
That's what it is.
Well, not being a progressive, I always take them on. I'm like, why are you guys like the champions of a community you're not even in? I mean, what who asked you for? Then if the community is telling you it's not the truth, then you listen. The whole thing is crazy. But anyway, we will get into it more. So, Mike, I'm going to just do the intro, and then we'll play a theme song, and then we'll be in conversation like we always are.
Perfect.
Okay. All right, Deborah, I'm ready to start the intro whenever you are. Dirty Moderates, today we're joined by a longtime friend of the show, Mike Madrid. Mike is an American political consultant, one of the country's authorities on Latino voters, and a co-founder of the Lincoln Project. Mike is joining me to talk about his newest book, The Latino Century, How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. And Mike is here to talk about the way in which the Latino community is often misunderstood. Even though the Latino community is the fastest growing segment of the electorate, the Democrats seem to be missing some key lessons of how to reach them, even as their support erodes among the Latino community. Will the rise of Latino voters continue to foment the hyper-partisan and explosive tribalism of our age? Or is there a way to really make both parties become attentive and understanding for this new wave, this new demographic change and its implications? Here is my conversation with Mike Madrid. Mike Madrid, welcome to Dirty Moderate.
Hey, friend, how are you? It's been a little while.
It's been a little while. Always happy to have you back, as I noted in the show notes, which you'll see when they come out, and mentioned you're a friend of the show. We've had you on 2 episodes. We've had to do some coverage. We're going to have you do some more, about the convention, which you and I talked about. But I want to dive into the book because it's a great primer for everything. And then we'll go a little bit backward. I wanted to read in the chapter, The Challenge for Democrats, this chapter. Okay, because I think it encapsulates a lot, and we'll take it from there. Okay, Democrats in the media have often portrayed U.S. Latinos as strangers in a strange land, when the opposite is true. We are not all lying awake at night worrying about deportation. We are not all working in harvest fields for shit wages. We are not all motivated by culture wars or political labels. Despite the clear indications of Latino upward mobility, Democrats have been stuck reinforcing stereotypes that are not characteristic of the Latino electorate as it is emerging. Every year in which Democrats focus on policy priorities exclusively for the poor and recently migrated is another year the Democrats lose out on attracting the assimilating and upwardly mobile Latino voters whose numbers are growing and whose support is vital to the party's and country's future. I mean, in many ways, and there's so much in this book, I think it would shortchange it to say this is what the book is about. But you are writing the book to say, look, we're facing a new electorate. We're in a fight for democracy, something you've dedicated your last 5-6 years, 5 or maybe more since Trump came on the scene to. Right. Let's unpack this, because I think it's important for all our liberal listeners to know. Because yes, Mike is Latino, folks. He can speak to the issue. I have to say this so they understand. How do you, at 30,000 feet, make sense of all this from where you sit right now?
Boy, that's a great question. And again, I think part of writing the book was trying to make sense of it candidly. I mean, the book ended up being a lot different towards the end than when I started. Yeah. The book was essentially designed to be a constructive criticism to both parties, because both parties are doing right thing and some of them are both doing the wrong thing. Yeah. The Democrats, let's talk about the Democrats for a moment, since you started there. And the challenge for Democrats is they have not yet come to terms with the fact that they are no longer a working class party. They believe that they are. They believe, you talk to a Democrat, they absolutely believe that they're the party of FDR and hard hats and union men and women and But the truth of the matter is, this is not Mike Madrid saying this. This is voter data. Working class people don't believe that they're the party of the working class anymore. The shift has been happening. It's been rather pronounced for the past 10 years. And as Latinos emerge as the fastest growing segment of the blue collar working class, that means they're losing Latino voters. And Democrats have a real orthodoxy. It's come from a good place, I believe, of trying to kind of address the issues of non-white voters as essentially some form of black voters. If you're not white, you're some shade of black. And what that means is oppression. And that doesn't resonate with Latinos. We have an affinity for the Black African-American experience. We do. We're a blended people by definition. We're half indigenous, half European. But the truth of the matter is there's an orthodoxy, particularly amongst white progressives who are the leaders of the party. 95% of the Democratic consultants are white progressives, to kind of appeal to Latino voters in a way that is reminiscent of an aggrieved racial minority. And there's no data, there's no evidence to suggest that that is the case. So the conversation always devolves into immigration and kids in cages and family separations and or farm worker issues or driver's licenses for the undocumented. And that's such a very, very narrow sliver of who we are, but it's an easy media narrative. And frankly, Latino politicians promulgate that mythology as well. So as long as Democrats are stuck talking to that segment of the community, one I have a deep affinity for, and I talk about it in great detail in the book, you're going to keep losing shares of the Latino vote. And the reason why, Adam, is very important to understand. This is the corollary to that setup and why this shift towards Republicans is happening. The Latino voter is emerging from being a racial identity voter to an economic class voter, because the explosion of Latino voters that is happening is in the third, fourth generation and second generation voters. About 25 years ago, that was different. Most Latino new registrants were foreign born. Today, that's less than 10%. It's overwhelmingly a U.S. born vote that is moving away from the Democratic Party. Notice that I said away from the Democratic Party, not necessarily to the Republican Party. And this is very interesting and very specific to your show. Latinos are the moderates in both parties. Latinos are the moderate voices. So we hold far less quote unquote progressive views in the Democratic Party, and we hold far less right-wing extreme views in the Republican Party. And so if America emerges as this multiracial working class, the party that's able to capture the hearts and minds of a multiracial working class is going to be the dominant party of the next 20 years. The Democratic Party really struggles with working class voters. And the Republican Party, up until very recently, was struggling with a multi-ethnic, diverse set of voters. And that struggle, whoever wins that struggle, is going to be the dominant party for the next generation.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that was really fascinated by in the book, and we mentioned a little bit before we started, the way you discuss how much politics really is both an art and a science.
Yeah.
And it's so important. Obviously, we have to live in the real world and work with numbers and work in data, which you do. And I love to geek out on that stuff. I've learned a lot from you too. And a lot of people are not into that part of it. They only like the qualitative part, but not to pit one against the other here, because understand the art of it is important. And here's where I'm going with this. So I grew up in Miami, heavily Latino, heavily Cuban. Okay. I'm sure you know these stories well. And all through the 80s, I grew up in a Democratic household, but we weren't particularly that political. It's just who we were. But all of our Cuban friends were hardcore Reaganites, socialism or communism and the fear of government. But underlying that was always, I am proud to be an American. Okay, this goes back to the 80s. I came here legally, fled Castro, came here legally, or I came here, and my family came here legally. Why are other people not? Why are and also assimilation and aspiration is what we want. Now, granted, these are anecdotal stories.
Yeah.
But I think that they kind of presaged or prophesied a lot of what you're seeing now is with that thinking among voters. And some of these voters, by the way, later went over to Barack Obama, but have come back to Trump, kind of like their natural home. I think that, these were the seedlings planted long ago that you're now granted each community, so they're not a monolith, and the Mexican American community in America is the largest of the influence. But you write about Cuba and Venezuela here, and you write about those different things that confound the media. How does this happen? How are they voting? Trump is a racist, all this stuff. And I think it's like everything, past is prologue,
Yeah, and there's a lot of common themes that kind of run through it. And I actually highlight the story of Giancarlo Sopo, who really kind of personifies being a Cuban American born in Miami, growing up as a Republican, Reaganite, anti-communist, becomes an Obama supporter, volunteer, worked for Obama. And then Trump emerges and he's looking at the Democratic Party and he's like, I think I'm more, with the Trump faction. And he's now a little bit more undecided, but he actually worked for the Trump campaign. So it's a great story. I highlighted there, but let's talk about the Cuban diaspora for a moment, because it is an assimilation story and yet it has its own exceptions. And as you put it, Cuban Americans, you got to keep in mind, it's only 5% of the Latino community. It's very, very small, but it's been very, very important because of where it's geographically located. Southern Florida, predominantly in one of the swing states that's been probably the key indicator for the past 20 years. Now, it no longer really is. Florida is essentially a red state. I don't think it's all that competitive, in large part because the Cubans have built a multi-generational Republican voting bloc that didn't exist 8 years ago. There have been times, the Reagan years, as you accurately point out, was one of those times where the anti-communist rhetoric really mattered, where it really worked, and it consolidated, again, this multi-generational voting bloc. But, since the Cold War, since the rise of Castro, the Cuban diaspora has been an important part of the Republican coalition, in large part because of that anti-communist rhetoric. That has never been the case with the other 95% of Latinos in the country. Venezuelans are a new exception, but that's still 1-2% of the Latino electorate. Very, 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 very small. So you try to use anti-socialism rhetoric or anti-communist rhetoric with Mexican Americans, it's literally meaningless. That means literally nothing. And I've struggled, in the Republican Party with that's kind of their default is, let's go talk about communism. It's like, you're not talking to 95% of the community that way. But more importantly was the point you brought out, which is assimilation. And that's exactly what the story is that's happening here, but it's happening, I think, in a unique way in American history. We have had very significant immigrant influxes in this country's history. The turn of the last century, a third of Americans were foreign born. I mean, just enormous inflows of immigrants, and the constant backlash of anti-immigrant rhetoric that created a whole lot of social problems, social challenges, not unlike what we see today. The difference, though, is that the migration is coming essentially from Mexico and through the southern border, and unlike being an Italian or a Greek or a Polish immigrant 125 years ago, those immigrants were never going back across the ocean. You literally changed your name at Ellis Island and you had your knapsack and $3 and you went to where, Little Italy or, whatever the diaspora was, and you figured it out and made it work, and you assimilated over generations. Here, the cultural fusion between Mexico, Central America, and the United States is very seamless. People are still talking on social media in Spanish, consuming, Central American, Mexican American content on Univision, on Telemundo, on Facebook, on WhatsApp. A lot of people go home for the holidays and, come back to the motherland and come back. So there's this continual cultural reinforcement that is reshaping the country's complexion. At the same time, we are seeing third and now fourth generation Latinos redefining the politics of our democracy. And I kind of try to explore both or all of these elements, I think, in the book in a way that is unique in American history.
No, very much. In the chapter on the challenge for Republicans, I want to highlight this. When you came on, I guess we did an election night, and we've had you a few times, and they were all great. But on one of the nights, you and I kind of went into like a sidebar conversation about, if you're a factory worker and you're Latino and you live in California and you're worried about your job, or you are worried about a blue state government listening to you, and a group of bureaucrats come in and say, hey, you don't care about green energy. What's wrong with you? These guys are like, hey, go fuck you, man. I mean, like, what? I didn't say I didn't care about it. I got my own issues. And I want to go to this, which you write about. There's the famous 2012 autopsy that the Republicans supposedly did. They did, that they would keep losing the popular vote in presidential elections. This is after Obama beat Romney, to be clear. And that would follow them as long as they double down on white identity politics. And let's face it, the Republicans have done that from time immemorial. The left reacts, I think, takes it to the other direction. I think it's also poisonous, but let's not forget, when white nativism reigns, people react to it, and it's easy to have a counter reaction. So let's not do that. But let's see. Let me read what you write here, because this is very important, and I'm going to then talk about Trumpism for a second. It's that Latinos, you write, in blue-collar industries are naturally gravitating toward the GOP's protectionist, very important, and anti-regulatory message. If you work in the energy patch of the Rio Grande Valley of Texas, the Central Valley in California, or southern New Mexico, or if you work in the housing construction industry in Las Vegas or Phoenix, or in the agricultural industry in Iowa or Wisconsin, or manufacturing in Virginia or North Carolina, then Democrats are often viewed as one of the greatest threats to your income. It's not that there's an anti-regulatory ideology in Latino culture. It's that there is an existential threat to your income. Yeah. Wow. First of all, it's like every swing state's listed in there number one. So you've got that from
I'm trying to send a message. Pay attention, folks.
Right. Other than I'm reading, I think not New Mexico and Virginia as much, but hey, all these other ones are in play up those states. The fascinating thing that people are missing here when you hear about people feeling pummeled by rising prices. Sure, inflation came down, but prices are high. If you work in the construction industry and the housing industry, prices are high. You're telling a huge swath of voters their pain isn't real. Exactly. Because you want your guy to be reelected. Okay, not a good strategy for a burgeoning community that, by the way, hears more resonantly, you could argue, Trump's protectionism. And it is a protectionist policy. I am not a protectionist, but hey, there's no doubting there's two things Trump, I say this, I hate to even say this, that he believes in. I don't believe he believes in anything, but I will say there are two things that I think propel his strength apart from the insanity. Immigration and free trade, protectionism, tariffs. No wonder, right? There is an appeal from a non-college educated working class Latino to a guy that says you've been hosed, NAFTA got you screwed, and all that. I'm gonna protect your job. A lot in there, but I love this paragraph.
Right, brother. This is why I love your show and love your brain and love having conversations with you. I mean, you nailed it. I mean, this is exactly right. Listen, 1 in 5 Hispanic men work in the residential construction space or a related industry. 1 in 5. Okay. So when interest rates triple in the last 3 years and the currency is devalued because of inflation by 25% over the last 3.5 years, don't tell me that these people aren't suffering economically. Right. It's not just that you can't work to build a house. You also can't afford a house because the prices have gone so high and interest rates make it unsustainable and impossible. On top of that, you're earning less money anyway because you're younger, you're poor, you're less college degreed. Those people are more susceptible to economic shocks. So stop with the S&P 500 is at an all-time high and the Dow's crushing it. I get it. That's true. And I'm not taking that away from Biden. I'm trying to light the fire alarm bells and saying, pay attention. You better start feeling some pain here because this pain is real, and quit dismissing working class suffering. Yeah. And the Democrats can't quite get there. They just won't allow themselves to acknowledge that and do the Bill Clinton thing where he was a master at. Go and feel his pain. Go talk about what it means. Go talk about what your solutions are. Talk about why it's happened. But Joe Biden is probably particularly uniquely suited to do this as an Irish Catholic blue-collar kid from Scranton anyway. Like, go do you, Joe. Go be Uncle Joe. And he can't do it. I don't know. Maybe it's the age thing. Maybe it's the presence thing. I don't know. But what I will say is the fact that they have not engaged the voter this way, Latino voter this way, is essentially ceding this voting group to the Republicans. And I will also say, and I mentioned those industries and those states for very specific reasons, so people will start listening and paying attention. But also because working class people view the Democratic Party more often than not as an existential threat to their income, their livelihood, their quality of life economically. Set aside the cultural left driftward. I mean, that's part of it, but that's not what's driving it. And the rightward shift towards Republicans is particularly pronounced with U.S.-born men. They're the ones who are swinging hammers. They're the ones who are working in manufacturing and assembly lines. They're the ones who are milking cows or doing row crops. They're the ones who are, working in the energy patch, as I mentioned, in New Mexico, in Central Valley of California, and Rio Grande Valley. I mentioned those districts specifically because that's where we've seen the most profound rightward shifts. In rural agricultural oil-producing regions, which is a pretty big swath of the American Southwest. Wow. So, until the Democratic Party understands and gets back to its working class roots, if it can anymore, they're going to continue to hemorrhage working class voters who are increasingly Latino, and they shouldn't be shocked that this is happening.
Yeah, and Mike, this is one of the things I was thinking about in reading your book. You go back to, I think, one of the great moments of great political. I mean, Bill Clinton was sort of, infinitely talented, as you know. And that in one of the debates in 1992, though I think it was the same one where H.W. Bush looked at his watch, a lady asked a question and said, how is the deficit affecting you? Remember the whole debate with Ross Perot and all that stuff. And George H.W. Bush kind of gave, for political geeks, you'll enjoy this, a Biden-esque answer. Well, we're working hard to reduce because we raised taxes, which was true. He had passed that huge tax package in 1990. The deficit was coming down. He did it at risk of his own reelection. Read my lips, no new taxes. Well, we're going to do it. There was a revolt on the right through Gingrich, all of the great history here. But when they asked Bill Clinton said, I know a lady named Betty Jane, and she's struggling. Her car's broken. And, again, he said, I feel your pain. He didn't give a wonky answer. A little bit like Biden's doing it, but here's where I'm going with this. I think that in the Trump era where everything's inverted and where Trump broke the left, and I include like all the Democrats, I'm not a Democrat, so I think like you, we can stand back and go, okay, guys, we're on the side of democracy, but you're losing your mind too. Ideological tribalism is hurting, is obfuscating the ethnic tribalism that's driving votes elsewhere. Does that make sense?
Very well articulated. Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's a real danger because the partisanship, right, is like, well, nope, the economy's better. Trump was the worst. Okay, Trump was the worst. But if things haven't fully gotten there, you have to sell. You got customers, essentially. You can't say, hey, you know what? We don't have anybody in the store. Fuck you, man. Don't shop here. Okay, well, how are we going to be in business? So again, I know it's a sort of corollary to what you said earlier, but this is so crucial. And that's why this book is so important. You being here is so important. And I'm trying, like you do, to sound the alarm bell in yet another existential election for your political malpractice, Democrats, could cost us the farm.
Well, that's my fear, is if they don't figure it out, we all suffer. So it's not, I'm not trying to be like I know better than you, or, no. These are Republicans, you don't know it yet. I mean, I explore some of those themes in the book. But the point is, if the Democrats can't figure this out, the whole country's got a very big problem, right? They need to win this race. I believe that. And look, you're articulating again very, very well. You should have written the book out.
I couldn't do the data part. I could maybe if you were ghostwriting. Yeah.
But the point is, I mean, unless you've lived in a family, I like to say, I didn't grow up paycheck to paycheck because we couldn't make it to the next paycheck. We always fell a few days short. We had to bounce, which utility was going to be turned off every week. So there was always one week where the gas was off, the electricity was off, or something wasn't going to work. And that we weren't able to kind of stitch it together. When you grow up like that, which is a lot of us, not all of us, but it's a lot of Latino households right now, especially in these times. The fact that the president's racist, it's like, okay, it is. I'm not saying I like it, but man, I can't lose my job down at the assembly plant, and these regulations that this legislature, this governor, this party is imposing on us means we're out of work. And that's a real thing. You can dismiss it all you want, and Democrats often do, and white progressives often do, because they'll be like, well, but we're calling you Latinx. Well, but we want to impose affirmative action for higher ed. And it's like, my reality realm, the vision of my reality is Friday. Okay, and it's Wednesday. I gotta get to Friday. Right. Like, I'm not thinking about global warming. I appreciate that you are. I'm not saying it's not real, but I don't have the luxury of thinking about gender identity in my pronouns. I got to get to a payday lending company because I got diapers to buy, and somehow I got to figure out the $35 I'm falling short on rent. Like, that's my reality. And those are where a lot of working class, lower working class people who are about to fall from the working class down into poverty, that's their reality. And you can say, well, the Republicans aren't doing anything about it. Well, at a minimum, they are perception of reality. And I think it's more reality compared to the Democrats. They're protecting those industries.
Oh, yeah.
And when you are viewed as a protector of that industry to get you where you need to go day by day, that's why people are behaving the way they are at the voting booth. And to look down on them, or to say, you know, you're part of the problem, and how can you do that when he wants to deport you, is just such an offensive perspective. And it usually comes from people who either don't know or haven't been in that experience for decades, to say that their reality is somehow more important than what people are saying. And perhaps more importantly, more offensively, is the dismissiveness of it's just these Latinos are reading Spanish-speaking WhatsApp chat rooms with disinformation. It's so dismissive and so offensive. They're not smart enough to know what's good for them. I'm starting to hear the hints of tone of that I used to hear from the Republicans in the 80s and the 90s. It's black and brown voters. Black and brown voters aren't that smart. They're not smart enough to know what's good for them. Right. So it's kind of better that they don't vote. And you're not smart unless you agree with me, is really what people are saying. And it's not just, it used to be a Republican thing I heard a lot in the 80s and 90s. I heard a lot on the American left today with white progressives.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is. Well, first of all, I think that one of the key data points of your book is lost, is that you're dealing largely with U.S.-born people. So to say that you're getting deported is to say you don't even understand your electorate when people are saying
exactly
that makes no sense. Well,
yes.
Well, I mean, I also read the book. I mean, thank you for writing it. I'm not, and I'm also fascinated by it because I am so worried about where we're at. And there's a disconnect going on about that I have to argue with people about. Sorry, I'm losing my earpiece here.
Right.
As long as you can hear me. There's a disconnect I keep arguing with people about, and they always go back to, but Trump's going to round people up, or Trump's going to do this, or Trump, and I keep saying you're not speaking to the right people. And there's another important message. And there's another important message, as your book says. Sovereign nations have a right to have a secure border. And Latino-born people who come, even those that come here and are not yet legal, they also want to seal the border because they've gotten a good job or they settle in over time. And this idea that everybody who's here and won't welcome new people, or not welcoming them, is sort of anti-American. It's the opposite. People are insisting that there is security and that there is safety and that their kids, and when you break it down, and I think the Republicans, as much as they demagogue it, I hate to say it, when Fox News goes and explains what coyotes are doing and smugglers, this is serious stuff. Fentanyl killing people. It's not like insignificant if 1 million people a year die of fentanyl. And it's like never discussed on MSNBC. I don't hear it. It's like, how is
same number of people who died of COVID. You can't be serious about one and not serious about the other.
I was staggered by the figure, by the way, 1 million people. Yeah. So, and I know it's coming from China, but it's coming in. Okay. Well, don't you care? By the way, it's going to come to your white OC neighborhood, for your white Detroit neighborhood.
100%. 100%.
So,
look, you can't. It's not racist to want border security. It never has been. And the fact that Democrats have never put forth a real proposal for border security is demonstrative of the fact that they are in the iron death grip of certain advocacy voices in their coalition, which have never spoken for the Latino community. They've spoken for a caricature of a sliver of the American Latino community, which is important and it's valuable. And I've been involved in fighting those same fights with them for 30 years, but I've never been under the false notion that that speaks broadly for where the Latino electorate is, because it's not. It's not, and it's becoming less so as Latinos starts to mirror the overall community's position on border security. There's very little difference now between whites and Latinos on border security. That's why Joe Biden has gone to the right and accepted 100% of the Republican Party's border security proposals. That's why Henry Cuellar and Tom Suozzi and Ruben Gallego created the Border Security Conference in the House Democratic Caucus, because the Democrats have got to get away from believing the mythology that this is somehow a compelling driving part of the Latino electorate. It's not. In fact, it's largely the opposite. It's okay. In fact, it's appropriate and responsible to want border security, serious border security. That's the first role of a federal government. I laugh because it's so commonsensical that to somehow believe that that's offensive tells you how out of the mainstream the Democratic Party has allowed itself to become, as it's so afraid of offending people's racial and ethnic sensitivities. Is the people that are afraid of offending don't even believe that. And that's where it's gotten. And I'm grateful that Biden made the pivot. I whether I like the policy or not is another consideration. The politics are smart, but it's also hopeful that the Democrats can get out of this headlock that they've allowed to put themselves in with this small sliver of voices.
The real tragedy here too is, and we're going to talk about your formative years and your early Reaganism, which I think, and I say that as a positive, is that when you had a George W. Bush who did so well with Latinos, and when you actually had Lindsey Graham before he went insane, and John McCain, and you actually had a bill, this predated Trump even, you still had what was then the Tea Party sabotaging a bill, to really deal with border security. And then as a result of that, it left this lane, meaning the Republicans were just going, were playing to their hard right base. It left a lane to be exploited by the loud leftist fringe, so that the Democrats then would offer nothing up. I mean, they're only been forced into this position because of the electoral considerations. There was never going to be a border bill, which is outrageous, because Correct. It has been a liability for Biden. And it wasn't, even though they can now, yes, Trump doesn't want it to happen for his own gain, but let's be honest, Dems, you didn't consider it till really the beginning of an election year, because I guess, seemed to be to see the writing on the wall. But the other thing is that relates to this in terms of getting Latino votes is if Biden is going to continue a tariff policy of Trump's, and he is continuing some, not others, but he's still speaking in a protectionist language more than other, you might say, Democratic candidates have in a while.
Yes.
Own that message. You're speaking. Why are you not talking? Why are you coming out with tariffs? And I have big problems with tariffs. But if that is what speaks to protecting a domestic a steel and aluminum plant, why are you not talking about it? Why are you letting Trump take? Yes. I don't get that. And it's like it's almost like one of two things. They don't know that the Latino vote is in there, or they think that
they're afraid of their left flank. They're afraid of their left flank. That's what it comes down to. Look, let me give another example. Look, you're 100% right. You hit a walk-off grand slam here, Adam. You're exactly right. And I'll also put it this way. We are producing more domestic oil than at any time in the history of the country. Joe Biden's doing that. Own it. Yeah. Go get some of those voters back. Like, you're doing it. I'm not saying it's good or bad policy. I'm saying it's good politics to own it and get some of those workers back into your corner. But the fact that you're afraid of it because you're afraid of this hemorrhaging is supposedly on your left, that's not where the voters are at. The voters aren't on your left flank. They're in the center. Go occupy the center. Same thing on border security. You now have the issue. And here's what infuriates me. And I was very public about this. If you're going to co-opt the Republican position on border security, which you should and you did, don't blame Trump and Republicans for not getting the job done. Who cares? You're negative 35 in American public opinion on this issue. Go take the issue. Go do what Bill Clinton did. Go triangulate it and steal all those voters. The more you blame Trump and the Republicans, and I'm not saying it's not true. Of course it's true. But you're allowing an issue to be partisanized and piss off Trump voters that would otherwise listen to you if you would demonstrate that you're doing something moderate, reasonable, responsible, and appropriate in addressing their immediate concerns. When are you going to learn how to win? Learn how to win. Take the W. Like, why do you got to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory on all of these issues? It's okay to be a good president. It's okay to run offense. It's okay. You should. That's what you should be doing.
You know, one hopes, just as a side note here, that, you know, and who knows what's really going to happen, but with Trump's conviction, you know, theoretically, if independent voters or people are really turned off by this, or there's votes up for grabs, to your point, Mike, now is the time. Grab a hold. Start campaigning on issues. It's already June, pretty much. I mean, you know, let's do it. I mean, there's nothing to wait for. There's a debate coming up, and you've got to get, and I know it's really always theoretically a post-Labor Day thing, but start talking about this stuff now. That's the other thing. You can't run, the whole campaign can't be about Trump as a convicted felon. Okay, he is, but what are you offering? Because a lot of these same people, Mike, right, who have an existential threat and worry about that $35, it's that deficit of $35 for their rent payment or whatever the utility bill is, they're not going to say, well, you know, yeah, I'm struggling, but Trump's a convicted felon. That's not a strategy either. That doesn't mean it's unimportant, but it's a little bit like all you should care about is democracy. Well, sure, if you're rich enough. If you're not, you should care about democracy. Well, it's true. I had a Trump supporter on my show who made a good point. We didn't really agree. Well, we agreed on some things, but I like her. But she said, you know, remember people in the working class, and she spoke not only about Latino working class people, but people who are fearing for their economic security, have to work 3 jobs. You know, neither she nor I have to do that. And that's a reality. And I'm fortunate because of that.
And that's it. And when you live in that world or familiar or grew up in that world, it's much easier to understand the immediacy of the priorities that you have. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's ideal.
No.
I'm saying it sucks, but that's the reality. And if you want to win votes, you meet voters where they're at, not where you want them to be. And if you ridicule them for not being smart enough to understand the big picture, well, then you know what? Shame on you. That makes you a bad citizen. That makes you bad at this democracy. That's your fault for not only not trying to learn to understand how to ameliorate those concerns, but for castigating people who are simply trying to get to make it through the end of the week. And so yeah, look, I mean and again, I'm not here to dump on the Democrats. I'm much more critical of the Republicans, by the way.
Yeah.
And incidentally, this book is not. It's not an argument for a third party. It's not an argument saying shame on all of you. It's trying to explain the circumstances with how this dysfunctional system came to be and why both parties are so missing the mark and what that's going to mean. And I think it's a very different book than people have consumed before with that understanding. The one thing I really try to do, Adam, and I think it's why we've developed a friendship, is trying to take all of the data and analytic work that I've been doing for 30 years and explain it in plain English for people that aren't in the profession to say, this is why this is happening. This is why people are behaving the way they're behaving. And this is what we do about it to get to where we need to go.
Very true. And I think, yes, the book for readers to know absolutely is not pro-Republican at all. But I think the interesting takeaway, because you see that the Republicans, or many people who probably will read this book, I can't speak for everybody, obviously, know that what the Republicans do. I think people have mythologized what Latino voters are going to do or do in elections, not realizing that in the last 3 elections, right, Barack Obama had 71%, I think you wrote, of the Latino vote, it went to Hillary at 66, and Joe Biden got 59%. Hey, man, for election, I tell people, for elections won at the, eeny teensy meeny margins, right? These little tiny crevices, that's bad news. You can't afford that.
Yeah,
it's everything. It's 11 points. I mean, whatever, 12 points. You can't say, oh, well, yeah. Well, Joe Biden, people always say, well, Joe Biden's, of course he's going to carry the Latino vote. I said, yeah, but if he carries, there's a rate of attrition, he's not going to get reelected. If he loses those key, if it diminishes enough, sure. Wow, what a victory. You lost the election, but you carried 55% of Latino vote. What difference does that make? And what does that show? Oh, Latinos are brown, so they vote Democrat. Well, they didn't. Because you now have a fascist in the White House. So
you nailed it. That's exactly it. I've been listening for a decade, and I was in a documentary called Race 2012 that was about the way race was playing in the 2012 election. It seemed like a million years ago, Romney Obama, and I made the prediction then that because of the demographics and the U.S. born nature of the demographics that are coming, you're going to see a rightward shift of people that aren't compelled as much. And of course, it's all played out. But every single year, Democratic consultants, the Latino pollsters that work for Joe Biden, dismiss this and say it's not happening. Doesn't matter. We're still winning the vote. It's like, yeah, but you were winning the vote at 20. Republicans were getting 27% when you started. They're now threatening at 45%. Like, that's a 20-point shift with the fastest growing segment of the electorate. What are you missing here? Like, how are you thinking that that's okay? And for the moment, what has happened is the math has allowed Democrats to get more white, college-educated women from the Republican Party.
Yeah.
The question is, numerically, that only lasts so long demographically. Mm-hmm. If you cede the Latino vote, which they essentially are, you're in for a world of hurt. You're going to lose elections going forward. And that's the danger that Democrats find themselves in, simply because they won't accept the science. For the party of science, they're having a real hard time accepting science and math. But that's all it is. These are election results. These aren't somebody just prognosticating or punditry. It's math. It's happening. It's science. It's evidentiary-based election results.
Yeah, which segues into what I also want to talk to you about. I've had the benefit of in getting to know you, and also even before I knew you, watching you talk about the Bannon line, which you write in the book, for your work, incredibly data-driven, very granular for the Lincoln Project, knowing that Arizona was a get, Georgia was a get, all this stuff. So what I wanted to ask you is, given your worries about this up for grabs Latino vote as it relates to both parties, you have different views on this, but for the Democrats, let's talk about, especially for Biden's reelection. The Lincoln Project and all this big, broad, uneasy, but important coalition in 2020 got Trump out of office, right? And the old McCain-Romney suburbs, let's call them, college-educated suburban women, enough of them went for Biden. He even did well in places like in the Altoona, Pennsylvania, and some of these places. He got a greater share of even white working class votes than had been certainly than Hillary did. But now you got the Bannon line. I know it can be 4 to 7%, 8%. There's the Republican up for grabs vote. What's the dance, if you will, between the Latino vote, that sort of shifting Latino vote, working class male Latino vote, and what the Bannon line may or may not do in the 2024 election? Because I'm fascinated.
That is such a good question. And that is,
I know it may not have an honest answer. I mean, a full-throated answer yet.
Yeah, no, I do, because look, the question you're asking is essentially this. Well, let me set the stage a little bit. The party that's going to win this race is going to be determined on whether or not Republicans can hold their white, college-educated female voters from defecting again to the Democrats. This is the same demographic that underperformed for them in 2016, that ditched the Republicans and voted for Nancy Pelosi, Democrats, in 2018, that split their vote, voted for Biden at the top of the ticket and Republican down ticket in 2020, and voted against the Republicans in the midterms after the Dobbs decision. So there's a 4 out of 5 election trend here of white Republican suburban college-educated women leaving the party. It's about 5 to 7%. It's that Bannon line number. Biden's people are betting that they can get even more. They're moving to the left, and they have in 4 of the last 5 elections. But, and again, long way to describe exactly your question, U.S.-born Hispanic men have been moving to the right in 4 of the last 5 elections. This started after the 2012 election because the Democrats were so consumed with talking about immigration reform, pathway to citizenship, all of these issues, which again, I agree with, I support, but are not top of mind for Latino voters when they're dealing with economic concerns and are increasingly working in industries where Republicans are viewed as their champions. And so Hispanics moved from 75% in 2012 to a historically low turnout in 2014 midterms to 67, 68% for Hillary Clinton, a drop of 9 points, then to a drop of 10 points. They dropped 10 points to for Joe Biden at 59%, and they stayed at that level in the 2022 midterms. This is a 5-alarm fire. And so again, the white Republican women are moving to the left. U.S.-born Hispanic men are moving to the right. Up until this year, that math benefited the Democrats. This year, it's parity, which is why the race is so close. The Democrats may have reached the end of the line with women. They may have gotten all they're going to get. They're betting they can get more. The Republicans are saying we can get a lot more of these Hispanic men over. And if they do, Arizona goes Trump's way, Nevada goes Trump's way. Wisconsin, there are more Latino voters in Wisconsin than African Americans. Wisconsin goes Trump's way. It offsets the margin in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, all the states that I mentioned in the earlier excerpt that you read. That's why they're doing it. That's the battle is, can Republicans get more Hispanics and can Democrats get more white college-educated suburban women? That's the whole race. Everything else is noise. Courtrooms, guilty, verdict, how much he raised, what the abortion is, that's the question. That determines who wins. That's what it was in 2020. That's essentially what it was in 2016. That's what it's going to be in 2024.
Yeah, and to get granular, because I love to do that with you, one of the things I've noticed on the electoral map is if you go to 2008, okay, where Barack Obama carries Nevada after Bush took it for 2 terms, okay, 2 elections. Although Bill Clinton carried it twice, but other than that, it was like a Paul Laxalt Western kind of red state, right? Obama wins it in 08, but he wins it a bit less in 12. And 16, Hillary wins it by less, Biden by 20. I'm talking Nevada specifically. And obviously, it's clearly a swing state. Do you think 2 things? Will Nevada be like razor thin close again? And B, if Nevada actually just goes red enough, do you think the other Sunbelt states will follow? Is that a sign, or is Nevada its own?
Nevada's a little bit its own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of all the swing states, Nevada is the one state that is actually becoming more Republican. Arizona and Georgia, Wisconsin even, are all moving towards a more Democratic position than they have for the past 3 or 4 election cycles. Nevada's moving in the opposite direction. It's moving more Republican. Now, the question becomes is why? And is it because Hispanics are voting more Republican? The truth of the matter is Latinos in Nevada have been voting in a remarkably consistent historical range that matches California and Arizona. Those 3 states, Latinos are still performing for Republicans at a ceiling of about 27, 28%. If Trump breaks through that by even a point or 2, then yeah, he will win Nevada. Where he's getting most of his performance is overperforming in white rural counties, which is not big in Nevada, but is big enough. And these college-educated voters that are in the burbs of Las Vegas aren't moving to the same degree that they were towards the Democratic Party. They are more of a non-college-educated, white-looking, facing voter, more of an economic voter than they are a cultural voter. So, sorry to get too deep in the weeds there. It's probably But that's Nevada. I think Nevada is probably the one state that I would say is more likely to go Republican than Democrat. I'm actually quite bullish for Democrats on Arizona. I was back then. I wrote it in the book. I was one of the first guys out there spending millions on behalf of the Lincoln Project saying Trump's going to lose Arizona. Trump's going to lose Arizona. People were telling me I was a damn fool. And I was like, that's not the way I see it. Unfortunately, we were right. I think Arizona, especially with an abortion measure on the ballot, keeps those Republican women in the Democratic fold. Kerry Lake is an absolute anchor that's going to drag down the GOP side of the ticket. And Ruben Gallego will bring out and get a better Hispanic break than any other Democrat, a white Democrat would. So things look pretty good in Arizona. Wisconsin is always going to be tight. I think that they need to be doing more in Wisconsin. I'm actually still bullish on Georgia. Most people are not. Most people are saying no. The Sun Belt's gone because Latinos are shifting to the right. I'm not convinced of that, and because not because of the Latino vote, although that's a big part of it. It's also the Sun Belt states have a higher than average number of white college educated voters. Whites are working in high tech. They're working in biotech. They're working in finance. They're working in healthcare. They're not working in coal mines like in the Rust Belt. They're not working on factory lines, right? White voters in the South, and and I call it the New Southern Strategy in the book. The white voters, in the Sun Belt are much more progressive in their views, even though they are fiscally more conservative.
Right. Mike, to go back, what I loved about the book, apart from all the fabulous data and all the warning signs we're talking about, was, a bit of your personal story, born to Democratic parents who, and originally, you really grew up mainly in Moore Park, but they were living in LA before, because we're roughly the same age. So you were in Moore Park, you were 2 by the time you were in Moore Park or something like that. Is that right?
6 months. 6 months old.
6 months. He was even younger. There you go. And it's interesting the way you kind of, your young political consciousness was shaped by leadership or lack thereof of Jimmy Carter and what Reagan could represent. And that message attracted you and made you believe in a country, and you did as a young Latino man, and the party was very, very different then, though, of course, Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush did very well with Latinos and were very, very supportive of them. Do you think that and I really enjoyed learning about, what your experience was, but do you think that aspirational message that I would say is Reagan-esque can really be carried forward by a Democratic Party that kind of has this via negativa idea of what the Latino vote should do? Because I subscribe to it. That's what makes me a moderate. I'm a kid of the Reagan era. My still view of America to this day is anybody can be what they want to be. I'm not saying there isn't racism. I'm not saying there aren't obstacles. I'm not saying different groups don't face different challenges. But I do believe in a rising tide lifts all boats. I do believe in an aspirational message. And I hate when someone says, well, I can't vote that way because I'm this or I'm that, rather than looking at the whole picture. We know that Trump is, gone full nativist, and they'd rather exploit than not. But can the Democrats post Joe Biden? Can they not fearmonger too? Because they're not helping.
Man, that's such
this is more philosophical.
No, that's such a good question. And as I'm thinking about it, going, okay, what does that mean? And I'm looking at some of the emerging characters, like my friend Alex Padilla, U.S. Senator from California, Ruben Gallego, who's struggling. He votes more. His voting record is very progressive, but he's turned moderate pretty well. I think to attract Latino voters, he's kind of turned to I'll go to soccer matches and boxing arenas. I get it, but I would much rather have him talking about housing and economic policy for working class people than, kind of wearing the sombrero and doing that kind of a thing.
But he'll win. He'll beat Kerry Lake.
Oh yeah, he'll win. The question is the margins. It's always margins.
Yeah.
And the bigger question is, does he become a national figure with the way that he wins?
Right.
And Alex Padilla, for his, California senator, he's actually gone to the left on the border issues and opposes, Biden's position on border security, which it's kind of surprising to me. Normally, Alex is methodically leading quietly, but judiciously in a more centrist position. He's really taken a more progressive tack. And so when I'm contemplating this, I was listening to you and I was thinking, okay, who would that be? What occurred to me is the way to answer the question is when both parties are consumed by this idea of negative partisanship and defining what they're against more than what they're for, the most likely character that will emerge with a positive aspirational message will be a Latino politician. And I don't know if that's a Democrat. I don't know if it's a Republican. It's more likely to be a Democrat, but I've not heard it yet. I think Ruben Gallego has that potential because he comes from a progressive position. He served in the military. He grew up in a, I don't want to say dirt poor, but very poor, struggling single mother family, and then fought his way to Harvard, goes to Iraq, and then, becomes a politician, and he's going to have to run in a competitive border state. Like, he's perfectly positioned to be what the emergent Latino voice is. I'm not convinced yet that his moderate side is going to over strengthen his progressive side. But what I do know is I think he's astute enough and sensitive enough and intelligent enough to recognize that the future of the Latino community, and as a consequence, his political future, is through a moderate centrist lane. And he's got the perfect opportunity to define that at this moment.
Yeah. The other thing in the book that I think is electoral malpractice and really worrisome is exactly this idea of how the Democrats consistently are pointing to the voter suppression trope, as a reason for low minority turnout. And you get very specific in the book, and you say Latinos regularly have the lowest turnout rates of any of the four major racial ethnic groups in the country over the past few decades. Clear proof that these voters are not being cultivated with a compelling message. Low voter turnout is not a sign of loyalty to a party. It's the exact opposite. It's a sign that the message does not resonate with the community. And then later in this page, you write, while Democrats consistently point to the trope of voter suppression as a reason for low minority turnout, this excuse falls short of explaining the bulk of the problem. There's perhaps no state in the union with more varied ways of voting than California, where we both live. You can vote weeks before an election, or even register and vote the same day. You can vote from the convenience of your living room, a standard polling place, or in a vote center. California has adopted nearly every imaginable method and process for voting, and for Latinos, voter turnout remains abysmally low. That's an obvious sign we do not have a voting process problem, at least not the largest Latino state in the country. And before you answer, it's like a little bit too of what I think I call kind of like a monochromatic identity politics thing. Is that, well, there's in the African American communities facing this, so this group is too. It's like Democrats, no community is alike. It's not the same story, it doesn't mean, like you said earlier in the show, like you don't have an empathetic alliance, but disenfranchising a poor Black voter, horrific though that may be, is not what's going on here.
Right.
And it's being read as the same thing. I argue in this really, this toxic cul-de-sac Democrats are driving into over race and ethnicity.
100%. And let me say this, and you always have to put the caveat because people will take your words out of context and beat you over the head with it.
Yeah.
Voter suppression does happen. But it's not. But it's very, 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 very rare. And you can define it however you want. I will tell you, as a political practitioner, voter suppression is very rare. Okay, it just is. So it is as rare as voter fraud is that the Republicans say. They're both bullshitting, and they're both dramatically overplaying their hands for partisan reasons. They're trying to piss people off about it. Now, having said that, they're very serious, and they should be taken seriously. And all those caveats, I'm not dismissing it, but I am trying to put it in perspective in the way the partisan cheerleaders will not. They've got a vested interest in blowing it up. The reason why I put this in the book is to demonstrably prove that you can have very low voter turnout rates in minority communities, even with the most ambitious, progressive, liberalized, resourced voting mechanisms, because people don't like your message. Maybe that's why they're not voting for you. Not because, we literally in California, 30 days ahead, we mail you the ballot. And you can go to a vote center to vote with a big community. You can vote by mail and return it back with a stamp if you don't want to. You can take it to your local polling place. Hell, you can have your friend or your neighbor or your mom or your kid take it in for you with ballot harvesting. You can vote any way you want to in California, and we still have the lowest voter participation rates. Mm-hmm. So stop with the voter suppression stuff for non-white people, okay? Because you can't blame that on Republicans in California. I mean, there are neighborhoods There are neighborhoods that haven't seen a Republican in 2 decades in California. Like, stop it.
Right. Yeah. Get over the. I think George Duke Meacham is no longer relevant here.
Get over it. Right. Stop it. Just stop. So let's start looking at why that is, and I point this out very clearly. Poverty and economic problems explain most of this. The lack of civic engagement is more often an economic problem in America than it is a racial problem. And I can say that quantifiably because it doesn't matter whether you're Latino in Los Angeles, South or East LA, or Black in Mississippi, in the deep South, or white in Appalachia. If you're poor, your propensity to vote, your propensity to be civically engaged, your propensity to run for office, all drop precipitously. Right. It's because you don't have a stake in society, not because you're Black, brown, or white. It's because you're poor. So how about we address that problem? If we can't get over our racial discourse, at least start helping out poor people wherever they are. Like, that's the point anyway. And once you start to ameliorate poverty, what happens? People start to take ownership in their community, ownership in their society. They start to buy homes. They start to worry about taxes and where that tax money is going. And they start to run for office, and they start to be more committed to their schools because their kids are going there and they're paying the taxes that support it. And all of these things have these beneficial effects. So I reject the notion that most of this low turnout has anything to do with suppression. There's no evidence of that. I'm not saying that there isn't evidence of suppression existing. Of course there is. There's also evidence of fraud. Of course there is. It happens on both sides, but in very, very, very rare cases. So stop acting like that's the bulk of the problem, because it's not. Quantifiably not.
Quantifiably not. Yeah. And I think the book comes to a general readership, your book does, at a really important crossroads, right? Because here we are, where we don't know. Look, there is a future without Trump. I do believe that. And there is a future, obviously, a future without Joe Biden. What are the parties going to do? Are the younger people on the bench going to gravitate toward it? As you mentioned early in the book and throughout the book, white identity politics of the worst kind practiced by the Republicans, which is, vile and horrible, is going to render them a minority party if they are to only double down on that and do nothing else eventually, because the electorate's changing. That being said, I love what you write about tribalism being like a failed version of pluralism. And here's what I mean. Even though the economic concerns are more protectionist and Latino men in factories and elsewhere, and housing construction elsewhere, are much more attracted to the economic message of Republicans, the Democrats are regularly running as the pluralistic, inclusive party when they're not doing the crazy left-wing identity politics stuff. But inevitably, they run up against it and they undermine their own message of pluralism by being kind of illiberal on the tribalism, by saying you have to vote for us because the other side's going to kill you or take your mother or whatever, all this stuff that scares people. It's very, very bad. And like you call it, the undead form of pluralism, like a zombie. It's empty, it's hollow, it's soulless, it's dangerous. Tribalism is a degenerate form of pluralism. And I think it's important because the book is speaking to both parties and speaking to everybody. That's why I want listeners to hear that the Democrats have an opportunity. They're losing their numbers. And if they do not find a way, and I'm only saying this because if there's not going to be a Republican Party like Reagan that's inclusive, I don't want them in power. But I also don't want a Democratic Party that gets by on its wits by pandering the lowest common denominator and just being a fearmonger party that also does not address the concerns of the biggest share of our electorate.
Again, let me applaud that. Yeah, that's the point. That's the point of the book. That's the point of pluralism. I think we're on the verge of becoming a more perfect union demographically. I think we are struggling as a country to understand that the underpinnings of democracy probably no longer work in the digital age. I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of those changes. They're awkward. They're uncomfortable. They are new. They are unique to this moment. They are something radically different than what we have experienced and trusted and relied upon for 250 years. But all of the seeds of success and all of the seeds of progress and all of the seeds of realizing all those Jeffersonian principles or the universality of all of us being endowed by our creator with certain inalienable rights are all planted there. They're all being planted now. And what oftentimes feels like death pangs, I think are really birth pangs. Something new is being born. Something new is emerging, and it is truer to our creed. It is a better example of what American democracy can and should be. It's more moderate. It's less partisan. It's less extreme. It's more reasoned. It blends better with our different political views. It blends better with our different racial bipolarization between black and white. It blends better between wealthy, poor, and middle class. We have the seeds of the glue to get us back together if we only look for it. It's all there. It's more moderate to the show's title. It's moderate. It's centrist. Wow. It's the intersection between right and left, and haves and have-nots, and top and down, and populist versus establishment. Latinos are bringing all those together to make a better, more pluralistic society, and it's nothing to be afraid of.
No. Amen to that. Before we wrap up, I know I'm going to have you on again to do more punditry than this does, but this book is so important. Do you have any, I don't want to make you a Vegas gambler here, but, based on your data or whatever, how are you feeling about the contours of the presidential race? I know we don't yet know the full effects of Trump's conviction, but I mean, aren't you concerned by the narrowness of this? I mean, I don't think this is a walk by any means. I don't think Trump becomes less meaningful as a candidate because of this. Do you?
With the verdicts?
Yeah.
No, it hurts him. How much we can debate, but I mean, it hurts him. I mean, Trump has a real problem with the Republican base. It's not showing up in polling, but it's showing up on election day. I mean, he's consistently losing 20% of his voters to candidates that aren't in the race and haven't been for a couple months. I mean, that's a sign. You have to pay attention to that. And so the polling, again, I think what we're seeing is polling that is based off of turnout models, which historically have guided us very well, but are no longer in a time of shifting coalitions. The coalitions I just explained. When you build your turnout models with these coalitions that are moving, you get a clearer understanding of the picture. Is Democrats are starting to benefit more from low turnout, high propensity elections. It's why they did well in the midterms. It's why they do well in special elections. Republicans are benefiting from higher turnout elections. There's going to be a high, robust turnout. Won't be as high as 2020, but it probably won't be as low as 2016. That makes for a very close race. But the fundamentals of this race benefit Joe Biden, at least at this point in late May, early June. There's a long, long way to go, but for the past 3 years, they've benefited Joe Biden. Not because of the economy, by the way, has nothing to do with it. Has everything to do with the math of the shifting coalitions, which have guided the presidential outcome since the year 2000. And if you follow that roadmap, the math says Joe Biden wins a very narrow election. And I think he wins today. Again, this may change. We'll see what happens because there are external pressures. If you asked me 6 weeks ago, I would say the same thing. But, I mean, I never thought that we would be dealing with the Donald Trump being guilty of 34, counts of felonies. If you asked me 6 months ago, I never could have, envisioned Hamas and Israel, happening. So things are going to change. Things are going to get violent, by the way. Things are going to get extreme. There will be political violence this year, and that's going to change public opinion. But the fundamentals of the race strongly suggest a Biden reelect.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think Trump's choice of running mate makes a difference in a year like this?
No. The debates
no one really votes, and no one really votes for the bottom of the ticket.
No, vice presidents don't matter. Debates don't matter.
Yeah.
Debates are going to be interesting. Guilty verdicts don't matter much. I mean, there's nothing's going to shift the trajectory of this race. Look, there's going to be a lot of hoo-ha and circus comes to town and the media going nuts about this or that, and somebody's going to fall on the debate stage or drool on themselves or wet their pants. That's all going to happen. It's not going to change the trajectory of the race. Math, you got to follow the math. There's a science to this.
Yep, there is. There is. And that's the key. And that's why your book is essential reading, folks. The book is The Latino Century, How America's Largest Minority is Transforming Democracy. It's both really exciting to watch, and also insightful, Mike, because you're bringing to bear, like you said, you're not just out here opining like some of these people on Twitter with no data or prognosticating because they feel it. and that doesn't serve us very well because it doesn't tell you much. And especially, like you said, the coalitions are shifting, the tectonic plates are moving. So there's, some knowns that we know and some unknowns, or whatever that quote was by Donald Rumsfeld, known unknowns, unknown knowns, whatever it is. And I appreciate you coming on as always and sharing this book with us, because it really, folks, you're not going to want to, there aren't many books I have a lot of authors on, but I want people to read this because this is going to shape these coming decades. And I'm so glad you're here to do it. I'm glad we become friends. And we are going to see you soon when we have you on to do some convention stuff for us to get into some punditry weeds. But Mike, before you go, share where people can find you on the socials. Where are you?
Find me on Twitter, is where I spend most of my time, at Madrid_Mike, at Madrid_Mike. If you're looking for the book, Mike Madrid, The Latino Century, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, or Simon & Schuster directly, just search for it. It'll take you right where you need to go. Appreciate any pre-sales, pre-orders, and your thoughts on the book.
And the book release date is June
18th. It's coming up. It'll be right around the corner.
Coming up, guys. Yeah, this will drop before then, folks. So you'll get a little bit of an insider account, a little preview of the book. Anyway, Mike, thanks again as always. And folks, thanks for listening. Stay dirty, stay moderate, and stay safe.